we call it growth-driven design, but it's probably growth-driven design light, the way we approach it. But it's to keep the cost fixed, keep the timeline fixed, but we let the scope be a variable. And that's it's a small change in the approach, but it has enormous ramifications in how you approach the project. Because if you're going to make the scope a variable, we need to know what's important, right? We need to know which part of this do we have to build now first in order for this project to be a success, and which bits are less important. And then if we do that, I'll talk about the logistics of it briefly in a second, but if we do that, then we can suggest as many improvements as we like, and we launch quickly, see what gets traction, and then reshuffle our priorities for the rest of that project.
Paul, Jason, welcome to Over a Pint. This is a special one, man. This is a special one. We're going overseas for this one, talking to a couple Brits on episode 9. Guys, Brian, Kurt, we made it. Episode 9. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's crazy. International, global.
Yeah. Guys, I'm Pat McGovern, Director of New Business Development over at Acedia. Brian, introduce yourself.
My name is Brian Meehan. I'm the president of Celtic. Celtic is a full-service marketing communications agency based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, USA.
I'm Kurt Lingle. I'm the vice president of Celtic.
Cool. And Paul, Jason from Web Presence today. Guys, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah,
cool.
Thanks for having us.
This is cool. Into it, guys. Why don't you just give the listeners, just give us a little bit of background, kind of bring everybody up to speed on Web Presence, what you guys do, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I can jump in on that. So we're Web Presence. We're B2B inbound marketing agency, newish HubSpot partner. We were founded back in 2004. We're a super small team. We're a super close team in Macclesfield in UK. And I guess to some of us, so we've been an SEO web development agency for most of our lives here. For the last couple of years, we've moved over to inbound marketing and getting more involved with our clients and being more accountable to the results we generate for people too. That's how we've made yourself. That's the journey we're on at the minute.
Cool.
Yeah, and I'm the marketing manager at Web Presence. I've joined fairly recently through lockdown, actually, because I don't think it ever would have happened. I don't know, Paul, if you agree, without the lockdown, but that we came into having these video calls where we just check in, see how things are going into agencies at the time. And then it looked like a good fit. So, I kind of virtually work in Cheshire now, which I've never been to. Never been to Macclesfield. I've never met Paul. So as far as he knows, I could be catfishing the whole thing. But I could be doing this to 6 companies right now. I'm not. But we're having a great experience so far, and just things going well.
Cool. Guys, one of the things that we want to touch on today is, Kurt and Brian and I, we're seeing the marketing and advertising world from our vantage point, right? Southeastern Wisconsin. We get a kind of a glimpse at the Midwest here in the States. Talk to us a little bit about just what you've seen going on, like for the past year. I mean, give us like overseas there. What has it been like? What has happened? And kind of lead that into where things are going.
I mean, I could start, I guess. So I'm sure you guys have seen the same, but like chaos would be how I describe it more than anything else. Not necessarily in a bad way, but anything we had resembling a strategy last year for how we were going to roll the business out was thrown away in March almost immediately. And then from a high level, at least from March, what I would say is happening changed in April. It changed in June again. It's changed in March and April this year again. So I think agility has been the big thing I've seen this year. People having to change over and over again. Nobody's been able to lock into one single working strategy anymore.
Yeah, I think people were reactive, and just the priority for the first stage of lockdown was just to stay in your job, stay alive. Actually, was the first thing, and then after that, keep the company going. And what that meant was obviously everything got paused. But it also meant that people had to like eventually start transitioning, and I think it's taken longer than we thought. But some people are starting to do that. People are no longer waiting for events to come back. They're looking to replace events, or they're looking to hold some kind of digital thing alongside their events and all the budget that they had locked up in that. So it's been, I mean, it just depends on your sector massively, I think. But for some agencies, it seems like agencies are doing really well or really struggling, and it was almost potluck as to what industry you were focused on.
Yeah.
That's what we've seen recently.
So,
You know, what's
guys,
interesting is I would say we've been very, very similar to you guys. And I saw it in three buckets. One, the first wave was fear and panic in March when nobody knew what this was. So everything was stop. Then it became, you know what, we do need to carry on. We do need to continue to market and be out in front of our customers and prospective customers. So let's ease into it. And now I agree with you. Now it's kind of like, you know what, no matter what's going on, we need to be extremely proactive. How do we stage events again? How do we get out and talk to our customers? You know, I think people still are going to be socially distanced and wearing masks and things of that nature, but I definitely see this tone of we're on the back end, let's get back out there.
Yeah, I think, do you know what I've also noticed is that because there's less stuff to do in a like you're doing less traveling, you're doing less meeting, and a lot of these conversations that used to happen at trade shows. As a result of that, I don't know if this is the same for everyone else, but my inbox is getting smashed with people, like just people I've never heard of. And that's LinkedIn inbox, that's email inbox. You know, we've got like 7 inboxes now anyway, just generally. Even Facebook, people like cold approach me on Facebook which is probably quite clever as a way to try and like, you know, they're outside. I check my Facebook messages a lot more than I do my LinkedIn, and if they can try and connect to me and add me that way, it's a good way of doing it. So what you're finding is everyone is sat behind a keyboard trying to break through, and that makes it just so much harder for everyone, I guess. It's quite difficult at the moment to kind of make your mark and really, well, everyone says they offer value, but to really show that you offer value, it's really hard, I think.
You know, quick question I have for the two of you, I guess, two-part is. One is, you know, if you look back at 2020, you're right, there was this panic and there was this this tendency amongst some brands just to hide while others, you know, were going about it a different way, depending on the space you lived in. Are your clients a mix? Talk maybe about the categories that you touch, where a lot of your clients currently live or were living in 2020, and what your strategy is moving forward. Talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I can talk. So this is something I'm going to call it 50% luck and 50% planning, because it wasn't all there. But me and the co-founder Lee, we've known a ton of agency owners over the years. And I'm not sure if this happens in America, but it's really common to see an agency have meteoric growth for a couple of years and then just go pop. They grew too fast, they couldn't cope with it, whatever happened, they just couldn't do it. So growing sustainably has been a big theme for us all the way along, that kind of make sure we're untouchable as much as we can. So we layered on 2 types of diversification in how we work. So we have 5 core services, right? SEO, social, paid advertising, emails, all the other good stuff. So each of those 5 services is one type of diversification because they have their different use cases. And the second is, as much as everybody's told us it's a bad move, we don't want to pick a niche. So we don't have a special niche that we have skills in. We just want to work with anybody we think's a good fit and we can get results for.
Yeah.
We have clients in travel, hospitality, manufacturing, education, retail, home improvement, DIY. Just a really broad range of customers, some of which I didn't even know existed. Their whole industry existed before we started working with them. But what that meant for us was, I'm sure you guys all had the same thing, but one afternoon in March last year, my phone didn't stop ringing, and 1/3 of the business just disappeared overnight. The paid advertising dropped off a cliff, and anybody in restaurants, travel disappeared overnight. But at the same time, because of how we were set up, the home improvement and anybody working in retail and e-commerce
Smart.
went through the roof and needed tons of extra support and time. So that's where the 50% luck comes in. It's the distribution of our clients just worked out that one walked out the door as another one walked in.
That's great.
Wow.
Hey,
Sounds like you sound like us. Sounds like I'm talking to Celtic right now. It's like the same name where I think Brian said earlier, we're very diverse, and you have a game plan. You have those core buckets that you kind of want to go after because you have some good experience, but absolutely where you end up going due to circumstances is sometimes you don't know. And we're the same way. We work in a variety of industries and we pick up business, and it's been a crazy world. So it's interesting to hear your story.
Paul and Jason, give us a sense from your part of the world about the agency community, right? Are you seeing like more agencies, pop up, and this is prior to pandemic, or are you seeing more things going in-house, which is definitely a trend that we've observed over here?
It's a good question.
At least from the people I know, I've seen lots of one-man bands, lots of people who been made redundant, they've lost their jobs, or they were just worried about losing their jobs. So it's given them the motivation to finally jump and do what they want to do. I think it's too early to see how that's going to go for all of them, because that's a lot of people vying for, against agencies that are established for decades. It's not easy to pull the rug out from under them. I've seen a lot of that, but in terms of agencies that we're aware of, the majority we know of are smaller now than when they were this time last year.
Gotcha.
You guys seeing the same thing your side?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, I just in Milwaukee, and maybe Kurt or Brian, you could speak to other markets here. I mean, some of the bigger shops have just, like my old agency has gone down by half easily, right? Since the pandemic. What I am seeing from just, this is more anecdotal, but just talking to people, things are picking up quickly, right? I mean, the hiring is happening, and there's definitely light at the end of the tunnel as far as that goes. And, Brian or Kurt, you might have some other anecdotes on that.
Well, I think, the smart agencies, when March hit, didn't sit around and wait to react. They reacted, and that was either cutting staff, maybe cutting salaries, consolidating. It was kind of this cost savings measure to weather the storm. But to Pat's point, now that we're kind of through it and at the end of the tunnel, now all of a sudden on Facebook and LinkedIn, we're hiring, we're bringing people back. We're seeing that across the board. So I think, like you said, the smart ones kind of did what they had to do to cut costs and maintain throughout the pandemic, but now it's growth mode, and we're seeing the work come in. I think there's pent-up demand, right? We said there's pent-up demand for travel, there's pent-up demand for sporting events and concerts, but guess what? There's pent-up demand in the marketing world to get back out there and get your products and services and brand in front of people.
From my perspective, I think 2020 only pushed things along. I mean, I think this was happening already. I think that what we were seeing, at least I was seeing, is that agencies were being forced to become more nimble, more quicker, less fat before 2020. So I think the pandemic only pushed things along further. Years ago, unless you were with a large agency, it was very hard to pitch business. Now, Paul and Jason, as you had said, there's a lot of, small bands. There's a lot of smaller agencies, boutique shops. And you know what? They're pitching big pieces of business because clients don't care. That's what they expect. I admittedly, I had a chance to meet the two of you for the first time a couple of days ago. So we had a chance to read up on you, your company. We had a chance to meet you. And obviously, you strike me, obviously, very very nimble, very entrepreneurial, and I think that kind of just drives a little bit into, you know, just some of your philosophies as a company. And maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. But I'm looking at some of the documentation, some of the things that you had shared with us, but just, you know, your growth-driven, you know, approach where, you know, it seems to me it's you know, the need to be audible, you know, and quick and not wait for perfection, but to get out there and start learning as you're doing. Maybe talk a little bit about that, because I think that's a trap that a lot of companies fall into, where they don't want to be quick and nimble. They don't want to, they're waiting for perfection. Your strategy is different.
Yeah, I mean, and I can talk about this. This is one of my biggest like passion projects. So if I ramble on too long, feel free to like flash the red light at me. But yeah, it's something I feel really strongly about. So my background's in software engineering. That's kind of where I cut my teeth in writing code. Then I don't know, nearly 15 years I've been working on the website side of things rather than sort of real software engineering. And this is something that it's been bugging me and I've been working on for years. And it took me a really long time. The team here will mock me for it because I did this in industry. This was a problem that was solved decades ago in how we approach projects. So as marketers, we have lots of data-driven things that we find really valuable. So we want to push things up quick, measure the results, and iterate over it to get better results in the next cycle, which is great. But you can achieve that same thing when you build a website and implement split testing. You can get the same result. But our philosophy here, mine at least, with how we approach building websites that are going to be the center of some kind of marketing campaign, is that the way we go about it is completely wrong. It's completely broken, but it's one of those things we've all just come to accept because that's how it's always been. So everyone just carries on doing it that way. So very, very briefly, if I oversimplify it, there's three elements to any of these projects. You've got the scope of the project, the budget for the project, and the timeline for the project. And how we normally go about a web project is somebody in a room decides those three very important things and then comes out to us as agencies and says, hey, build this thing for me. And people like us who are more consultative we'll do what we can to get the most out of that project. But otherwise, we're just going to build it to the budget, to the timeline, call that a success, and then we're on. That's a good piece of business as far as we're concerned. So my problem with that is that approach doesn't map up with a what the company needs necessarily, and B with how things go in the real world when you're working on a project. And for context, I'm talking like mid-sized projects. You know, it's not a little brochure website, but it's not an enormous piece of software either. It's kind of somewhere in the middle, your average business website. So there's three big things that go wrong with that, where we have like bad incentives with those kind of projects, right? So when somebody comes to you with that project and we know better or we have great ideas, we can't really question the scope because that's already been agreed. We don't want to scare them away from doing the project. So that's bad. And if you do suggest those new features as you're partway through the project, when you've got to know it and this thing presents itself, that should be celebrated. That should be really valuable. But actually, that counts as pieces of work being out of scope, over budget, late. I'm rambling on that, but there's just lots of things that don't line up nicely. With our approach, we call it growth-driven design, but it's probably growth-driven design Lite, the way we approach it. But it's to keep the cost fixed, keep the timeline fixed, but we let the scope be a variable. And that's it's a small change in the approach, but it has enormous ramifications in how you approach the project. Because if you're going to make the scope a variable, we need to know what's important, right? We need to know which part of this do we have to build now first in order for this project to be a success, and which bits are less important. And then if we do that, I'll talk about the logistics of it briefly in a second, but if we do that, then we can suggest as many improvements as we like, and we launch quickly, see what gets traction, and then reshuffle our priorities for the rest of that project. And And logistically speaking, what it means is if you were to come with, say, a random figure, it's a £20,000 project in here. What we try to do is what makes it attractive to the client. Say, give us 5, maybe 10 of that budget to build the initial MVP, everything that's essential to this project, and let's put the rest on a retainer over a period of time, and run things out that way. And so far, this has been a couple of years in the work since we rolled it out now. It's been incredible in terms of actual results generated from people's opinion of how projects have gone. So yeah, I mean that's it in a nutshell. I know that's a lot of talking about.
So Paul, let's dive into that for a little bit. So you're saying, okay, the timing and the budget we're going to lock down, but the scope is something that's going to be a little bit in play.
Love it. Yeah.
Right. But now if the budget's locked down, if the budget's locked down, then this. I'm always associating that with the scope. So how do you overcome that gap, right? It's because it's like I'm going to pay you to build a website. That has a definitive, like you could argue it's like it's going to take 6 months, 9 months, whatever. But you could go back and forth on that. But at the end of the day, I'm going to have a website and it should cost me X.
Yeah.
Right. But the scope could be, well, do you want a website that does this, or do you want it to do that, or do you want it to do this? I mean, how do you at some point narrow it down so you can attach it to a budget? Yeah.
So yeah, it does require like a rethinking of how it's a whole approach change. So if somebody comes with a fixed budget timeline and fixed scope, it's just not a good fit for GDP. You have to accept those now. But what's happening? You're doing this anyway. You just don't think about it. Because what we do is we put £20,000 aside. We spend 3 to 6 months working on this project. We build it, we launch it, and then it sits for 2 years, and then we start again, right? You throw the website out and do it.
Yeah.
Do it again. So the rethinking is we call it a launch pad. So let's build the minimum viable product that's this really flexible, perfect base to build on top of, and then instead of spending £20,000 over 2 years, let's just spend £10,000 a year. So that's how the budget stays fixed. And then in terms of scope, it's kind of the same as if a customer comes along with 100 line items that we would want to charge £100,000 for, but they only have a 20K budget. Right now, they'll reject our proposal and go to a cheaper developer. But this opens up the possibility of saying, right, let's build the most important 20% of that project, and let's work our way through the rest of the 80% that you asked for originally.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
You know, this is something that is near and dear to my heart, because one of the biggest challenges that I see is the set it and forget it model, where it's exactly what you were talking about. Is we do A, B, C, we launch the site, hurrah, let it sit for 2 years. And nobody is sitting there challenging and saying, was it working? You know, when people come to the site, are they taking the action that we want them to take? How is data being used to drive our website and change our website? So to Pat's point, it's like, what's the disadvantage of the set it and forget it? What are those people? I mean, if you could talk to somebody and say, I know you just want to slam out a website and get it done. What's the disadvantage of that versus what you offer?
It's in results. It can be measured in pounds and dollars. If it's that type of website. So going back to the incentives not lining up, where in the traditional model where we do it, it's in our interest as agencies to finish that project and run, right? We just get paid, we're done, that's the end of it. So it's not our job to hold the website accountable to hit results. And the person internally, the project's finished, the budget's gone, they've got other jobs to do and an event to plan and brochures to get out the door. So it's not their job to hold the website accountable either. So in my experience, frustration just builds up for 2 or 3 years until they assume the website's bad and do the whole project again and, you know, keep that cycle going. The bit they didn't want a new website. They wanted somebody to look at the website and improve it. It just manifests itself as a new website right now because I don't think people know there's a better option.
I've got another thing I'd add to that as well. Can you hear me okay? I've had to go onto mobile 4G.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
There you go.
The other thing I'd add to that is that I think there's a knock-on effect to turnover and like fatigue. Because do you know the amount of times that myself and people I know have joined a company and there's the excitement of the new website, right? The new branding. And they'll go through that process and they'll really understand the audience and they'll do the research and they'll know why it didn't work last time, but they'll make it work.
Yep.
They'll get that project going and it will be good. And after 2 years, they'll be like, we've got it, we've done it. And then after a year, maybe something doesn't quite look as good, or maybe someone new comes in, maybe more senior, and says, hey, why is this green? Or why is that? Or why haven't you thought about this? And it's because, it's now 3 years ago when they started putting this together. In that time, Google Analytics 4's come out or whatever. There's new things that can happen. But when you start coming back around to we need a new website, that's when you start looking, isn't it? That's when you start thinking, okay, I don't know if I can do this again.
Yeah.
Project. The fatigue that has on people when they're thinking, we've been through this before. What's different this time? Whereas with GDD, you're constantly reevaluating, looking at the data, changing. It's a continuous improvement as opposed to a big project that is stressful from the outset. And you start thinking, can I really go through that whole thing again, knowing what it was like last time?
I think you guys nailed it. And for everybody that's listening, I'm glad you just explained it that way, because I think you're right. A lot of times it's just like, look at this beautiful website. Let's just sit and admire it and click around and live in its majesty. Where at the end of the day, it's like, no, let's ask questions. Let's meet once a month. Let's talk about what are the goals? What's the measurement? What do we want people to do? I love your model. I think it's fantastic.
Well, my bigger beef is when not only do they, when you have some that just don't even want the site to live, and they're waiting for perfection, and this boat is sitting in the port, and when I look at your GDD, it's kind of like, let's let the boat sail and let's figure it out. I got to tell you guys, I appreciate you describing the GDD philosophy. And from my perspective, when I'm hearing you, Paul and Jason, talk through it, flexibility, nimble, these are words that keep coming up. And to me, it almost seems like it seems like a cultural philosophy at your company. I know we're talking about a website here, but the way you're talking through this philosophy, I mean, you do a lot of things at the company, not just web design. I mean, it seems to me that's a philosophy, and I'm just wondering, when you're out there trying to bring in new prospective clients, obviously we're all trying to find what makes us different, what makes us unique, what makes you different from the other firm down the road, right? I mean, I'm just, it seems to me this is a pretty big differentiator above and beyond a deliverable when it comes to web. I mean, is that something that you sell through as a philosophy as well, as part of your culture?
Yeah. So it's hard to differentiate ourselves on this as marketers because, you need something big and shiny, like a disco ball flashing outside the door. But we don't have that. But I think at Web Presence, we don't aspire to be this giant ivory tower agency. We want to be the best small agency. Lee and I, who own the company, want to enjoy our jobs and work with clients that we like. And we don't need to be a trillion pound company to be happy with it. But value is the word that comes up every day here. How are we providing value? And then I think backing that up with real action is important. So one of the big differentiators we have here is that we're completely contractless. So you can leave us at any time you like. There's no commitment to us. There's no renewal dates on anything. And therefore we have to provide value, right? Nobody's going to keep signing off that monthly bill that arrives unless they can justify it with whatever results were important to them that we've hit. So innovating, making sure we're doing something good and that actually matters to the bottom line is key to our survival. Otherwise, we'd lose all our clients really, really quickly. But we've had clients here. Our oldest client is 17 years old with us. They've stayed with us the whole time. That's our kind of metric for success here. What's our average client lifetime with us, rather than pounds and pence on a profit and loss sheet.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, the thing that I think holds a lot of people back in marketing in just general, this isn't a new idea. I'm basically just stealing sound bites from Gary Vaynerchuk, but it's really true that we're just so scared of living and dying by our last campaign. You put the campaign together and you put the forecast, and you're scared to put the forecast together because you're like, what if it doesn't hit? You know, I'm putting my name to this. I'm telling you that I know that this will hit those numbers, and when it doesn't, you're checking it every day. This is just relating to PPC, but it's the same with SEO and anything else you do. You check it like it's a barometer for your worth as well as a person. So you really live by those numbers. And if when you're told that it's okay to make a mistake, or even just test out, let the market decide whether your ad copy and your ad design and your ad strategy works. When you're told that's okay, and then when we don't get the conversions, then we know not to do that next time. When we're given that freedom, you can do a lot more. You achieve a lot more. It's failing fast is what Paul has always kind of said. And I think it really comes across in the results.
Guys, before the show, we were talking, and you mentioned that just a minute ago, Paul. You guys have been around 17 years. That's amazing, right? I mean, that's no small feat. So congratulations on that, guys. And I'm sure now you guys have a good book of business just from the fact that you've got a reputation, right? You've got clients that you've serviced and provided a ton of value for. Talk to us, because I'm just curious. Outside of just the kind of word of mouth, right? What are things that you guys are doing or have found effective in getting new business? Where you're at?
I can talk about historically. Jason's our point man on what 2021, 2022 is going to look like in terms of lead gen, because it's changing. But it's been, I hate to admit it completely, but we're so reliant on referrals. We do a good job for our clients, and we ask for referrals, and they're generally very happy to recommend us. So it's somewhat reliable, but you can't forecast growth on referrals. We can't know that next project is going to lead to another project for us. So that's been a weakness. And I'm not sure if you guys will suffer from this too, but as a small agency, the rags to riches of, you do a lot of work, you win a new project, and then you get busy doing the project. So you're not out finding new customers, and then finish the project to crickets, and I'm running that cycle for a long time. So for us, partnerships has been an enormous part of how we've sustained ourselves and grown. So around here, at least, there's a ton of, I should say we're quite a focused agency. We're a digital agency. So web, social, SEO, PPC, emails. We just do those things. But around us, there's PR agencies, there's creative agencies, there's more traditional agencies that outsource all of the work and they're just account management. And all of them need our skill set. So over the last 5 years, I've built a network of nearly 10 partner agencies that we work with now, either as part of a partnership or completely white label.
Brilliant.
So as a agency, not our pipeline, but we have a lot of pipelines feeding into us. That's just given us the freedom to focus on the work and not constantly be having to battle for new business all the time.
Paul, you broke up a little bit there, but so let me repeat what I think you said is you've got a bunch of, you connect very well with other agencies that are complementary to you and not competing, and is feeding you numerous pipelines of different businesses.
That's it.
Yep. Yeah.
What I could add for any small agency is I think the smartest move you made was hiring Jason, because as business owners, you think we're just going to sit around and think strategically all day and do business development, right? The reality is, if you look at what Kurt and I do, is we're heavily involved with our clients. We're heavily involved in projects. We're doing a lot of the block and tackle on a day-to-day basis. And when we get together to have a meeting, you go, hey, that project went great, but who have you been talking to? Have you been out networking? Have you, gone to any association events? Have you, and sometimes it's crickets. It's like, no, I've just been busy. So having somebody dedicated full-time to business development, I think, is key for any business. And Pat, I'm sure you would agree that, partnering with agencies is a smart move. I know you guys have done it successfully at Acedia.
Yeah, that is that is a definite channel that we look to and try to grow as much as we can. Though that said, I'm kind of surprised at how oftentimes agencies can't find ways to work together more.
Yeah.
You know, there a lot of times it's like putting two cats in a very, very small cage, right? It's you know, it's like, well, they're going to steal the business. Well, they're as opposed
Yeah.
to, boy, we could grow this for both of us, and you know, everybody involved can make a lot of money, and at the same time, hey, guess what? The client gets a really great value. You know?
Absolutely.
Some people just can't see that. Some agencies just can't see that possibility.
As in an agency meetings, have you ever had those agency meetings where there's obviously like two agencies in the room, and you're both trying to show off a little bit, and it's just like a buzzword boxing match? You just got like, just everyone's just trying to drop the biggest gem, and it's just like, what are we doing here? Like, it's just crazy, right?
Yeah, you've got to work it holistic and storytelling.
Never.
Yeah.
Never.
I have to tell you, I've walked out to some meetings and turned to my colleagues. I'm like, wow, that was just like, don't know where we're going there. Way over my head.
Guys, as we wrap up here, talk to us about what you're seeing ahead, right? I mean, I think we're all kind of feeling like, okay, we've turned a corner. You know, the UK is definitely opening up. Businesses hopping. Where are you guys going? Like, what's happening in specifically from web presence, but maybe just in general, where do you see like marketing, advertising kind of going?
I'd say so. The words come up a few times while we've been talking. So from our side, we're seeing doors open again. People look. They're not just spending now. They're looking ahead again, which is what we're used to, which is good. But I think one of the distinct changes, I'd love to hear if you see the same, is we've spent the last few years talking about growth. Everything's been about growth. That word is on every slide of every presentation we've sent out for years. And we need growth on the growth as well. Like everything's growth, which has been killer. But this last 6 months, maybe over here, the key word is efficiency, automation. So it's how can we do what we need to do now, but with a smaller headcount in the office? Like, do we need all of these people and all these partners and all these things involved? When we can automate, when we can push some of this to the side. So that's been a really key differentiator I've seen this year, that growth isn't number one, it's efficiency. I mean, what do you think about that? Is that something you've seen?
So to me,
anybody?
Definitely, I'll take that, guys, and then I'll bounce it over to Brian and Kurt if you want to jump in. 1,000%. You know, and let's just talk about some of the ways that it's being manifested and what I'm reading about and seeing. Business travel, we'll take that as one thing. I don't ever see business travel coming back. It's the way it was, right? Where that whole game has changed dramatically. So that's just becoming more efficient, right? Why do you have to go see someone in person? You've been doing the Zoom thing, right, for 4 months now.
Think, or is that what most people think?
I think that's what most people think, because Jason, that traveling's a hassle, right? I mean, you know, I think we all have probably done plenty of meetings where you're basically, you'll take a day or 2 days for an hour or 90-minute meeting. You know, and it's like, that's just not efficient. There's more things that can be done. Now, is it going to be totally that way? No, of course not. There are some times when you have to do the face-to-face thing. There's not a question about that. But I don't think it's going to return to where it was. I don't know if it's ever going to return to that level. So, you know, for sure. And then the thing that Kurt and Brian and I have talked about is just how efficient our place is going to be, just because of the real estate. Right? Do we need an office that could house X amount of people, or could we get by with something way smaller, knowing that, you know, it's only going to be a fraction of the people that are going to be in here at a given time? And if we have to rent out something, we'll rent out a bigger space for, you know, a company.
Yeah. You know, from my perspective, just you know, I think it's I think it remains to be seen. It's like anything in life, when you don't have something for a while, you miss it. And I think, the last year and a half, my philosophy has always been, we're going to keep the good things that we've learned, because we've all learned a lot of things over the last, 12 plus months. But I think we've also seen some things that clearly don't work. I still subscribe to the philosophy that I think we can get better at utilizing different types of platforms and channels and Zoom and things like that. But, I also think sometimes, we still work better together. And we see it with some of our clients where there's a hunger to want to meet face to face. And I hear what you're saying, Pat. I'm not saying 100 degrees we're going that way, but I think it's going to be a blend, because I think that still works, and it's still needed. Case in point with the four of us, I love having the four of us here.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet that if we ever had an opportunity and we could meet face to face, I can only imagine about the things that we would be discussing and where that could go and all the great things we could solve. So, jury's out for me, because I still think it's going to be a mix. Because there's certain things that I've seen that have worked really well, and I think there's things that, in my opinion, they haven't worked very well. So we're gonna have to figure that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the other thing to add to that, I'm living in London, right, just outside from incredibly large skyscraping buildings that really need us to be filling them. Like there's a massive investment in things going back to the way they were.
Yeah.
And that investment is got a lot of the policymakers are involved, like have ownership of some of those buildings. So I think there'll be a push to go back to normal, just to keep the shops going, like the economies that exist over there, right? Whether it will last, whether people will just be like, nah, I'll go and look for a job where I can get remote work, because I know that exists somewhere. Like I've got the whole world I can now look for jobs in, as opposed to this one that's asking me to do business travel every week. Like eventually it could just be that it's not possible to find people unless you offer that arrangement. So I don't know. Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? It's a really hard one to bet. If I had my money on it, I'd say that things will actually probably go back to a fairly. I kind of agree with you, Kurt. I think people will miss it and will be pushed to go back, but it will never go back completely.
Yep.
Jason,
hey, Pat,
Paul.
I know we're kind of wrapping some things up here. One thing that we didn't do, and I'm very curious to learn about, is what beer our friends from the UK are drinking. So if we can go around the horn and maybe see what they're sipping on.
Yeah. So I went to a shop and I said, "Hey, I've got to impress some Americans about the beer I've got. So give me a really nice one. Give me a story about the beer." And as a result, I came out of that place with not that much money. So he basically sold it's great. It's really nice. It's brewed in Walthamstow. I forgot all the story about it, but it's called Studio Lager Pilsner. It's nice. I've also got one that's brewed in Edinburgh for later.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Okay.
Very cool.
That's mine.
Jason, hold it up. Let's see what's the name of it?
So that's the signature
brew.
And then this is the. Oh, I don't actually know if I've got that. I've got two more. Well, one of them's from Edinburgh. I don't know which one. That's mine.
Very good. Who else? What else? What is everyone else drinking? Let's go around the horn. Paul, what do you have?
I'm cheating a little bit and drinking tea, because mine's it's a Guinness West Indies Porter. That's what I'm going to grab. But I drank my supply at the weekend. So
that's so English. So hey, drinking tea to the end.
Right.
I got to ask you, Paul. The English, when you drink tea, is it just straight tea, or do you put cream in your tea?
Cream.
No, we don't put cream in the tea.
Okay, that's just like no one does that, right? Okay.
It's a tea bag and a milk. If you want to be fancy, you drink Twinings tea, and then don't tell anybody that it's Twinings.
You do that, Paul.
Hey, Pat.
I couldn't say.
Hey, Pat.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, I just want to, for a final thought, but I do want to plug what I'm drinking here. I am drinking a Belgian Imperial Stout from a local craft brewery down the road, Raised Grain Brewing Company. Very delicious. That's what I've been sipping on. this past.
That looks awesome.
And
That's
gents, I
awesome.
picked one in honor of our friends overseas. I picked something very, very local, Miller Lite, which is from our friends at Molson Coors, brewed right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, USA. So a little hometown brew there.
Nice.
This is for you guys. Little Guinness.
Yeah.
Right there.
Nice.
Appreciate that, man.
Hey, for my perspective, real quickly, I just want to say, as we close, and I mean this as a compliment to both of you. You know, when you look at companies, what a differentiator is. Your personalities, and if you are a reflection of your company, you strike me as a very easy and approachable company. And by no means does that mean that you don't challenge your clients or you're not strategic, but I think that's something that is very valuable, because there's a lot of people in our industry, let's face it, that are hard to work with. And Jason, you alluded to it earlier, when we've all been in those meetings where it's who's the smartest in the room, and agencies sometimes have a reputation where they're not fun to work with. And I think, we're running a marathon here. And if you enjoy the process of the people you work with, you're going to have better success. So that I think when I talk to you too, you seem very easy and approachable. And I think that's a very good thing, and probably a key reason why a lot of your clients like to work with you and why they trust you. So it's been a pleasure from my perspective. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kurt.
Nice to meet you. And guys, it's been a pleasure to join this. I feel like we could talk for a lot longer and on many other occasions. And I hope we do podcast, because it's really interesting just to hear how you guys kind of do things, and it's whether it's in a different country or not. You got the same problems, you deal with them the same ways. You're coming up against the same struggles.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how similar we've got some of our problems are. So thanks Brian and Kurt and Pat for organising.
Jason and Paul from Web Presence. Guys, it's been a gas. Thanks so much. We'll be in touch.
Awesome.
Right.
Cheers,
Thanks, guys.
guys.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
See you later.